Hello, everyone. Welcome to This Way Up, brought to you by the Zionist Voice. I'm your host, Ted Goldstein. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about Jeffrey Epstein and what it means for the Jewish people now and in the near future. Unfortunately, this is going to be a very dark topic, but it's one we have to talk about nonetheless. Let's start with a question. What was the major Jewish conspiracy going around the world in 1926, 100 years ago? It's hard to remember. It's hard to think about because we don't talk about that. We talk about the world before the Holocaust as this kind of primordial place where anti-Semitism was brewing, and it would obviously lead to the Holocaust, but our pain and suffering and the amount of anguish we feel when we think about the Holocaust usually prohibits us from thinking about what happened beforehand. Or perhaps it's not that we are prohibiting ourselves from thinking about it, but it's that the world, which wanted to move past the Holocaust so badly, wanted to forget what it was that led up to the Holocaust. Because it's not logical. It doesn't make sense to say, well, anti-Semitism has been this problem for thousands of years, so it was just inevitably going to result in something like the Holocaust. That's not true. If that was the case, we would have seen things like the Holocaust happening all the time throughout history. But unfortunately, what happened before the Holocaust was that a different type of anti-Semitic conspiracy was spread. Spread in a different way than it had been up to that point. It's the international Jewish conspiracy, the protocols of the elders of Zion, and Bolshevism, or communism in general, was basically seen as a Jewish plot. And these three things coming together formed a kind of intellectual armada against the Jewish people. No matter what the Jewish people did, no matter who they were, no matter where they were, they had to be a part of this great global conspiracy. But of course, no conspiracy can really get anywhere without a name. Without a name, you don't have a true conspiracy. You just have a theory, for lack of a better word, right? Jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams. Well, the people who believe that jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams are the same people who believe that George Bush, there's the name, was the person behind 9/11. Or, if you've been following more recently, they don't believe that George Bush was behind it. They believe that the Jews who controlled George Bush were behind 9/11. The major conspiracy before the Holocaust centered around the Rothschilds. And there were a number of movies made in Germany that were about the Rothschild banking conspiracy. Ironically, some of these movies were made to explain who the Rothschilds were, to do the classic, let's fight anti-Semitism, let's tell them who we are, let's show them the truth. There are these movies that the Rothschilds were a real banking family, and they made a huge innovation in the banking world, and by using their familial communal connections, they were able to basically bank better than anyone else was able to beforehand. But presenting that model and that vision and that idea to the world in the 1920s did not help the Jewish people. It didn't make people think, oh, these people are really great at financial systems. They've really done a great job. No, what it made people think was, we were right all along. They have been manipulating the banks, and they have been manipulating our financial systems. We were right. We knew exactly who these Jews were. And now, 100 years later, we're no longer dealing with the Rothschild conspiracy, we're dealing with the Epstein conspiracy. And on the one hand, it would be a mistake to look at these two things as though they're the same or they're related. They're very different conspiracies. They're very different in nature. And on the other hand, they're very, very similar in that what we have is a wealthy individual with an incredible amount of connections to other wealthy and powerful people who seems to have been using his wealth and power to essentially kidnap children and rape them. This is the quintessential anti-Jewish conspiracy throughout all history, is that Jews steal non-Jewish children for our own nefarious devices. It's either because we want to bake them into matzah, or because we want to traffic them, or we want to corrupt them. There's all kinds of different anti-Jewish conspiracies when it comes to the kidnapping and manipulation of children. Now, what we're seeing coming out of the Epstein files are there's really two things that we have to deal with when we think about what's happening with the Epstein files. On the one hand, there are the facts that are coming out. There are the individuals, the names, the people that we know were clearly on the island and clearly did nefarious things and clearly were involved with Epstein. And the facts are maybe 1% of the damage that is being done or created from the Epstein files. The other 99% is my logical conclusions based on the small amount of information I've gotten. And, it's not illogical for someone to look at the Epstein files and to say, wow, there's a lot of Jews here. There's the facts, and then there are the feelings. And the feelings are much more important than the facts. They always are. And the feelings that I'm seeing on the internet across, many different political spectrums, the feelings that I'm seeing are, we were right the whole time. There is this international conspiracy of rich Jewish people who are manipulating the world and stealing our children and using their financial power to cover this whole thing up. And a lot of conspiracy theorists have been vindicated by the Epstein files. And it creates a very difficult and dangerous thought world that we're living in. If just for example, if you remember Pizzagate, there was a QAnon conspiracy that there was an international ring of wealthy financiers and politicians who met in this pizza shop in Washington, D.C. to sacrifice children and I think to harvest them for their adrenochrome or something like that. But the premise was they're meeting in a pizzeria, kidnapping children and killing them. And now that conspiracy, which was long mocked by many, many people, has essentially been vindicated. Maybe it wasn't in a pizza shop, maybe it was on Epstein's island, but the way that people feel is there was a conspiracy about rich people stealing children. We were mocked for talking about it, and now it has been proven that there is a real ring of rich people stealing children. So who are we going to trust? Certainly not the media. And so into this low trust environment where no one is listening to what anyone has to say, and there's certainly no moral authorities involved, into this low trust environment, we've just released 3 million pages of files from the monster of our modern world, Jeffrey Epstein, that implicate thousands and thousands of people. Some of those files are still redacted. And what we're now seeing, what I'm seeing at least on the anti-Semitic parts of the internet where I do my research, is it's like the floodgates have opened. And the people who have for so long felt that the Jews were manipulating them feel vindicated, and they're coming out of the woodwork and they're riding high. So now if we're thinking about this, if we're actually understanding what we're dealing with, we're dealing with a new conspiracy that has way more legitimacy than any of the old conspiracies. And all of the work that was done to disprove the old conspiracies has become useless in the face of the Epstein trial, the Epstein files. There is no going back. There is no way to go back to the world before the Epstein files were released or before this story broke. And the unfortunate reality is that the Jewish position in the Western world has been sliding very aggressively since October 7th and really since before then. And now it's going to fall off of the cliff. I hate to sound like a pessimist, but I'm really just trying to tell you the truth so that you can be prepared. This conspiracy and this scandal is going to stick. It's going to stick the same way that the international Jewish conspiracy before the Holocaust stuck. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion was the most important book produced in Russia, and it's something that spread very quickly in Germany when all of the white Russians, the Russians who opposed the revolution, fled Russia. They came to Germany, and they brought their anti-Semitic conspiracies with them. And when they got to Germany, they combined their anti-Semitic conspiracies with the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, with the anti-Rothschild conspiracies that were already existing in Germany, along with the traditional anti-Jewish tropes of Jews stealing children, blood libel, raping Christian women. All of those things came together in the 1920s in Germany. Right? Remember, this is a very specific time and place in the world. You have an incredibly weak political structure, zero faith in the aristocracy of Germany, zero faith in the political leaders, and a tremendous amount of anti-Semitic conspiracies coming out. And that was basically exactly 100 years ago. And in 1926, Adolf Hitler is sitting in prison because of his failed beer hall putsch. It is very important to think about this because 100 years ago, none of us were alive. Every 100 years, all new people. And so the people who were alive to remember how Germany went from its Rothschild anti-Jewish conspiracies to the Holocaust, they're all dead. None of them are here to tell us this is what happens, you need to watch out for these things. It is up to us to study the history and understand it. And it's a very high stakes proposition because if we fail, we are likely to repeat it. And the very scary thing that a lot of us are realizing right now, especially, American Jews, is we are not nearly as powerful as we thought. We thought when we were growing up that we were Americans just like everybody else. But that's very quickly becoming untrue. That, Robert Kraft spent $15 million on a Stop Anti-Semitism ad in the Super Bowl. And the only commentary I've seen on it is from anti-Semites who are using it as a meme format. They're using the anti-Semitism ad to promote their own anti-Semitic ideas. And that's bad. I mean, that's very simply put, that's bad. We are not in the world that we used to live in. And unfortunately, people like Robert Kraft and people from that old world where there weren't these kinds of conspiracies spreading, they don't understand what we're up against. They don't understand this beast because they spent most of their lives they spent all of their lives living in post-war America, which is the best place in the history of the world to be Jewish, bar none. And they lived in a historical anachronism where they didn't understand the realities of anti-Semitism. Their parents did, and their children and their grandchildren will, but that generation has no idea what real anti-Semitism is like. They just don't. And maybe, you can talk about, the tension in the teachers' unions in the 60s and the black anti-Semitism of the 1970s, and even if, depending on how old they are, you could talk about the Ku Klux Klan in the 50s. But compared to what we're seeing now, that's all child's play. That we have re-entered a global Jewish conspiracy that it's acting every day in this world, and it's gaining more and more power to the point where it's a lot bigger than the Jewish people are. It's a lot bigger than the Jewish people are. The anti-Semitic conspiracy against us is so big that what I'm seeing now is basically all of the modern problems are being thrown into the Jew. The Jew has caused all of this. There's a new term I learned called goy slop. Goy slop is apparently all of the bad things in the world that the Jewish people have put out for you, the good goy, to consume to become weak. Goy slop is legalizing marijuana so that you'll be too lazy to go out and go to the gym and get a job. Goy slop is pornography so that you'll, have lower testosterone and you won't be interested in dating. Goy slop is drag shows where people are going to convince you that dressing up like a woman and being gay and all of these things, it's going to prevent you from your true white masculinity. Goy slop is seed oils. Goy slop is processed foods. Goy slop is this, that, and the next thing. Goy slop is not going to the gym. Goy slop is Instagram. And the central premise is that the international Jew has been putting all of these things into the world to take away your power. To me, it's really interesting because they're so close to being right that what they're talking about with goy slop, it's really just slop. That all of these things, they're right. They are bad. No one's going to sit here and tell you that pornography and marijuana and processed foods and seed oils are good for you. They're not going to lead you to a more meaningful and fulfilling life. But I'm also not convinced that the Jewish people are behind all of these things. At the end of the day, like all things, human greed is behind all of these things, right? The marijuana industry is a billion-dollar industry. The seed oil industry, it's a billion-dollar industry. Pornography, it's a billion-dollar industry. And they'll say, oh, well, if you follow the money, you'll always find a Jew. Yeah, you'll probably find Jews wherever you go. And you'll also find non-Jews because manipulating human beings and manipulating the human psyche to make money, there's nothing more American than that. And there's nothing more human than that. I mean, the reason we consume slop is because we are animals. We're not angels like we'd like to believe. We try. Hopefully we get better at it, right? The goal of living is to go from consuming slop to consuming whatever the opposite of slop is, a healthy meal. You want to grow as an individual. With this new framing, I think that goy slop is going to become a very ubiquitous term in short order. On the one hand, because it sounds good, it's just, as a poet, I got to say goy slop. It's got a nice cadence to it. And on the other hand, it's actually a very good way of describing what I would say is one of the big problems in our world, which is the prevalence of slop everywhere we go. And by calling it goy slop, you put an enemy on it, and so it makes fighting against your own desire, right? Because at the end of the day, no one else is forcing you to eat processed food or smoke weed or watch pornography. That's your own weakness. And the people who are putting forward all of this stuff, they want to have an enemy who, oh, it's the Jews who are making me do this. Probably not. But that is the centerpiece of dangerous anti-Semitism, is when you start to take human issues that are purely based in the human psychology, human nature, the human life, and you start to make them the Jew. The Jew did this, the Jew did that, the Jew did the next thing. When you start to do that, you create a very, very powerful self-fulfilling prophecy. Because the way I understand it is like this. You are a white American man, a true WASP, and you are wanting to live a powerful life, to live a successful life, to do the things in your life that you want to do. Wonderful. And because of X, Y, and Z, you're not living the life that you want to be living. You don't own a house. You don't have good job prospects. You don't have a romantic partner. You're missing things. There are things in your life that are absent. And there are ways that you could bring all of those things into your life by working for them, by chasing them, by following the way up that people have been following for thousands of years. If you want to grow, growth is available to you. All you have to do is work for it. But working is really hard. And the idea that I'm going to have to quit smoking weed, I'm going to have to quit watching pornography, I'm going to have to learn how to talk to women, I'm going to have to find a way to make meaning in my life. That is a very daunting prospect. But if all of those things are actually not my fault, all of those things are part of this global Jewish conspiracy to feed me goy slop and keep me weak, then I don't need to make those changes. I don't need to be stronger. I'm not the reason that I'm failing. It's the Jew. The Jew is the reason that I'm not living the life that I want to live. The Jew is the reason that I'm downwardly mobile. The Jew is the reason that everything is going downhill. And the irony of all of this is that my goal here with this podcast, with This Way Up, is to help people get out of that framework. Because when you're living in this life with all of these downwardly mobile things, and we all know that things are going downhill in society, but when you see all of those things going downhill and you yourself are going down with them, it's a very daunting prospect, because that means that your life is a downward, your life is a downbound train at that point. And what we are trying to do with this podcast is offer people a way up that is not built on hating other people, not built on blaming the Jews or the Democrats or the Republicans or the immigrants or the whoever. A way up based on your own human agency. That is the better way forward for the world. My concern is that we won't get there because this anti-Semitic conspiracy will spread far faster than this movement will. That it's so much easier to talk about goy slop and to talk about all of the things that the Jews are doing to the righteous white man than to actually just do the things that you need to do. It's hard to be a good person, and it's hard to live a meaningful life. And we've spent several generations pretending that living meaningful lives is not important. We've gotten rid of the traditional family structure. We've gotten rid of religion. We've gotten rid of community. And now all we're left with, apparently, is goy slop. And no one's happy about it. And it's not the Jews' fault. It just can't be. It can't be anybody's fault, because at the end of the day, you are responsible for your own life. And that's probably the most embarrassing and unsettling thing about anti-Semitism, is that it's a ubiquitous philosophy in human history. And it always comes out when people feel that they're out of options for their own lives. They've lost control of their own lives. They've lost their own ability to captain their own ship. And so who's to blame? The Jews. This new conspiracy, the Epstein global conspiracy, is going to stick. The Jews will be affected by this for decades, if not longer. What we will see in the coming weeks and months is people coming out with all manner of anti-Semitic conspiracies and not being canceled for them. They are going to remain in positions of power and in positions of success. In the near term, there may be repercussions, like the woman who spoke at the White House press conference on religious liberty, and she just got fired. And that's going to continue to happen in the near term. But in the long term, that's not going to continue. What's going to happen in the long term is people like Tucker Carlson will continue to promote these conspiracies. They will gain more and more traction and plausible deniability. And I would wager that within 6 months, any kind of vaguely anti-Semitic conspiracy will be allowed and tolerated. Jews killed Christ. Jews evaporated babies in Palestine. Jews move money around to hide their sexual predilections. All of those things I think are going to come back in vogue. They're going to be everywhere. And Jews are not going to want to fight this in public because, one, we're going to be subjected to all manner of humiliation. I mean, if you are a Jew on the internet and you post things that are pro-Jewish, you're already experiencing this. And there's going to be a lot of danger that comes with it as well. That to be a public Jew in this world is going to invite just tremendous danger. The Epstein files represent a sea change in the reality of anti-Semitism in the West. That all of the work we have done post October 7th to try to, combat anti-Semitism and to fight these things, it's all a wash. It's going to be, compared to the damage of these files, we might as well not have done anything. And it does seem that the traditional ways that we've tried to fight anti-Semitism with the commercials and the movements and the whatever and the education has been totally wasted. It hasn't moved the dial on anything meaningful. We clearly don't have a good model for fighting anti-Semitism. And perhaps we never will. In some ways, what we're doing is foolish. We have an ancient philosophy that's as old as Judaism. The only two philosophies in the history of humanity that have never disappeared are Judaism and anti-Semitism. These two things seem to go together, and that the hatred of the Jewish people is as consistent as the existence of the Jewish people. So what is there left for us to do? What can we do as Jewish people, as people who care about morality and wisdom, as righteous people? What can we do now that we see this global conspiracy spreading and spreading very quickly? One fact that we need to constantly hold on to is that every individual is responsible for his own life. Something that we've really gotten away from as a society in the past 10 or 15 years because we've been talking so much about groups. But the world is actually made of individuals. And you as an individual are the one who determines the course of your own life. There are things you can't change, and there are things you can. And what I'm seeing is people are so sick of the way that they've been living that they're looking for an excuse. But there is no excuse. There is only work. There is only growth. If you want to live a better life, you need to do it. Period. If you want to stop watching pornography or stop smoking weed or stop, sleeping in every day, you need to be the one to quit, to stop, to look in the mirror and say no more. What we are seeing from this anti-Semitic conspiracy that's spreading is a desire for people to blame their own inadequacy on the Jews. And so, by contrast, we need to set the precedent that you can be whoever you want to be without blaming anyone. That's what growth is. That's what strength is. That's what it means to be an individual in this world. That's what it means to find the way up, to grow and to be better and to be stronger every day by your own hand. And once we set that precedent, once we set that example, we'll be able to show the rest of the world that it's not the goy slop that's holding you down. It's your decision to eat it. You are the one who chooses what you want in this life. And most people are not able to do that. Most people are weak. They're scared. They're afraid. But those of us who are willing to make that leap and make that jump, we can set an example for others. That it's embarrassing if you feel that your life is out of control and you blame the Jews. That's embarrassing. That's a personal failure. If you want to make your life better, there are ways to do it. And we'll show you the way. It's not easy. It takes time and effort, but it's possible. You can grow. You can find the way up. And that's why anti-Semitism and the collapse of moral authority in the West are so closely tied together. The collapse of moral authority in the West has left people living completely meaningless lives. And because their lives are meaningless, they are looking for something to blame. And so they blame the Jews. And these two forces go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, over and over and over again. They are self-fulfilling prophecies. And in order to deal with one, we also have to deal with the other. You can't have a world without global anti-Semitic conspiracies if you have people living such meaningless lives. They are going to look for some kind of excuse. And so the solution is meaning. The solution is purpose. The solution is a better way of living. It's a waste of time for us to keep trying to convince people to stop hating the Jews. That's never going to happen. As Jews, we need to become stronger and we need to live the lives that we want to live. We need to show what it looks like to live a meaningful life and set a good example. We can't be expected to bear all of the problems in the world. No one can do that, and it's a ridiculous proposition. And if things don't change soon, that is the situation we're going to have. We're going to have a world of people who are blaming the Jews for everything and blaming themselves for nothing. Now, I'm not so naive as to think that this will all work out well and that it's just a question of if we can do the right thing, this will change. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that there are many, many, many dark developments ahead of us, unfortunately. I think that we are moving into a much worse time to be Jewish and, frankly, to be a thinking person. And we have every right to be scared. But if we let that fear dominate our thinking, then we will become small. We will become tiny little representations of what we used to be because we've become so afraid of what is out there in the world. And so as we look forward to the world as it is now, with the new reality upon us, we need to look with clear eyes and make sure that we understand truly what the situation is, that this is a new level of anti-Semitism, and that what we've seen since October 7th is going to pale in comparison to what we see coming out now. Because all of that is still in the water, and we've only added to the fire. We must be clear-eyed and thoughtful about the situation. But we also cannot lose hope. We cannot lose our agency. We cannot lose our fight. This is the most important battle of our lifetimes. This is the most important struggle of the 21st century. Can we save meaning and moral virtue from the claws of anti-Semitism? Because those two things are directly at odds. Human agency, human virtue, and human excellence are opposed to anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a belief that thinks someone else is the reason that I am suffering. But all of human greatness is built on personal responsibility and personal accountability. When you take responsibility for the things that happen in your life, you become the actor and the agent in the world. And so until we are able to do that, we can expect much more anti-Semitism. And I hope and I pray that in this century, the voices of meaning and moral conviction and personal strength will win out over anti-Semitism. Because we saw what happened in the last century. We saw what happened when people turn to hatred and to simple answers and to fear. And we need to make an attempt. We need to do what we can to grow, to be better in this century, to avoid making the same mistakes as the last century. And so I'd like to conclude the way we always do, by saying, spread love, spread light. I'm Yisrael Chai. Thank you so much for joining us on This Way Up. I'm your host, Ted Goldstein. We'll see you next week.